Welcome everyone. I'm going to say good afternoon. There is also people where it will be good morning, so welcome again. It's 3:05 UK time, and I think we have a number of countries representatives, so I'm not going to try and guess what anyone else's time zone is. So I'm just going to quickly run through some bits before I hand over to the important people. So first of all, just introducing the team. We've got Peter from LiveAction, who looks after the EMEAR Partner Alliances. So he works very closely with us. Myself, who's the MD at Nivola Distribution. The hosts, we've got Alex, who is the senior sales based in America, and Tony, who is our senior sales consultant, who's based in France. So we're covering all plethora, and Peter is in the UK, just to let you know. So yeah, all plethора's covered here. So just quickly, I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about an intro to Nivola. It will be very swift. We are a distribution company, been around for probably about 10 years, very focused on not only services but products as well. We cover a number of products that our resellers indulge in. The first one is cloud, which is technology as a service. So any service that we deliver via the cloud sits in this silo. You can see probably some names you might recognise: Mitel, RingCentral, Alcatel. If you're a German partner, you'll probably recognise Enfon and NICE. So NICE is the contact centre side of things. Mitel, RingCentral, and Enfon are a UCaaS player, and Rainbow is also a UCaaS player, more on the hybrid side of things with Alcatel Lucent. We also cover what we call intelligent networks. This is where LiveAction sits, but alongside that we have Sangoma, who are very strong in the gateway side of things. So with the SIP introduction in the UK, it's quite a strong piece at the moment. We also work with Ingate, very strong Swedish SPC supplier. So they've been around for some time, but very strong in SPCs, and also the gateway side of things. And then finally Garland, which sits alongside the LiveAction in the taking the information that LiveAction push out on the TAP world. We then also have our traditional, this is where we were born out of in one respect, the UC side of things. You can see a number of products there. Alcatel is our biggest brand in there, so we're the UK comms distributor for that. Sangoma, which actually owned Digium, Sangoma brought Digium out a couple of years ago. And then we've got some contact center products with Varela and Braxtel, and some classic SIP handsets. So that's on the UC side of things. As I mentioned before, we also deliver services. We deliver services around most of the products we sell. We have about 15 to 20 engineers around the UK, which actually also covers Europe as well, delivering technical services, whether it be pre, post or support on a number of products in the portfolio. And then finally, our latest silo that we built is meeting room solutions. This is, with the way the world is moving, is collaboration, meeting spaces, huddle rooms, and this obviously now takes it with the situation we're in, takes it to another place with interactive screens, sharing, and cameras and soundbars. So that's our latest move into the collaboration world. But what we are key about is everything is intrinsically linked. So you'll see today when we go through the LiveAction side of things, it's very much about how the world's moving, understanding networking, the infrastructure at the bottom that allows us to deliver the UC, the meeting rooms, or the cloud services. So everything we do is intrinsically linked, and we're quite proud of that. Obviously today we're talking about LiveAction, so we'll introduce the guys, and they can run through the subject matter that we're talking about. Before we go there, just something very quickly. Just recently, 21st of April, So right smack bang in the middle of the lockdown in the UK, we just did a survey, just considering the activity that they've seen between March and April. It was all about the channel partners, so all our resellers, and understanding what the remote working solution demands were, and whether it be remote working or working from home, and what they have been asked for and what they can deliver. So some of the results, I'm not going to go through them all. Clearly, 70% of the respondents said they saw a significant increase in requests. I'm sure we expected that. What's interesting is that 50% of them expected the demand to continue. So once we get out of the lockdown, they expected this to actually continue, and there will be different requirements outside the other end. So, we feel quite strongly that at the moment, people have got these solutions for working from home or remote working, but what they want to do is make sure they can enhance them. And that kind of comes where 65% believe they don't have the perfect solution yet, so therefore there's a great opportunity. One of the other things is the support side of things. So, a significant amount of people thought that the actual remote working needed quite a lot of support initially. Once it's settled, then fine, but certainly initially, the support side of things. I think the plans, which is very fluid, as we know don't know what we're going to look for, but certainly over this period of time, they want to actually make sure all the customers, all the resellers are saying we're going to provide more support, more solutions, make sure that they can see what else is out there, what they can do with the solution they've brought already to make their people who are working from home or remotely being part of still the wider company. And that's key for them as well. Some of the findings, so obviously what that led on to is opportunities for our partners. Clearly, they expect the demand to keep going. They also think that they can actually reach out to new partners. So they've obviously hit their existing partner base, but they see now with the marketplace, with the verticals of the market they're in, they can actually now go into a new environment they might not have been selling into in the past. They expect hybrid to be a key thing moving forward. So with the on-premise environment, they expect that to stay, but they want to make sure that a home worker or remote worker has the same look and feel, whether they're at home or whether they're in the office. And what that means is obviously upselling, whether it be applications, whether it be support skills, whether it be hardware, whatever it might be, to ensure that that experience is better. And they don't see this slowing down at all when we go back. It'll actually, we think, over the next 6 to 12 months, people want to make sure they put something in place that should something happen again, or they have the flexibility, or they see that there is some, tangible benefit of people working from home. They have got a good workplace to sit in. So it's an interesting survey. If you want any more information, we can give you the full results. I'll just flick through it, but it was quite an interesting. We'll be probably doing another one in 4 weeks to see how the market's looking then. And we will obviously be happy to feedback back to everyone. So that's me done and dusted. Just quickly, if you've got any questions, please use the chat. We will come back to the questions and answer them either as we go along or at the end. We're going to try and keep everyone muted so that there's a flow to this, but at the same time, we're more than happy to have interaction at the end if people want to have questions, or if there's some key questions coming up during the chat, we can pause it and we can listen to those. So it's quite fluid. Let's see how we get on. I am now going to pass over to the main people.
Right, good stuff. And let me share my screen. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Peter Provart, as introduced. I'm the EMEAR Partner Alliances Manager for LiveAction. I've been in the industry over 25, 26 years in networking, and I would to say that this period of time is an interesting period of time in terms of the changes in networking is a bit of an understatement. With me, I've got Alex Cameron, who's one of our senior system engineers. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. Again, Alex Cameron, great to be meeting you. My history kind of comes with some of the stuff that we're going through today. My background is in Department of Defense military networks, trying to send voice and video over satellite networks and managing tiny bits of bandwidth, but very important data. So taking a lot of that experience and expertise and working with LiveAction, and really resonates kind of with what's going on today. But yeah, I personally live over in California in Palo Alto, and yeah, great to be talking and meeting everybody today.
Brilliant, great stuff. So what we want to try and do today is give you some insights as to what is happening out there from a network traffic pattern point of view, and the impacts that are going on in a variety of customer segments, and then how you can help customers mitigate some of the IT operational challenges that they face as these network traffic patterns impact the network, and more look to then what is some of the groundwork and foundational capabilities that can be built into those networks to allow them to cope with this, and maybe any other macro event that happens in future. But we'll start by looking at what's happening out there today, some of the stuff that they can be doing day to day, and then what are some of the opportunities. So clearly it's been indicated there's been a massive shift to everybody working at home, and in working from home, very early on we saw many customers ramping up the purchases of laptops and home computing equipment, and VPN technologies to allow workers to work at home and VPN back into the data centers, and therefore traffic would have been shifting from the branch into the data center into the VPNs and those edge devices, reducing a little bit the private WAN capacity, but certainly increasing the amount of bandwidth used out to the internet. Secondly to that, there's been a huge change in the types of applications. Instead of people sitting at a desk with a desk phone, maybe connected to a legacy PSTN implementation or a VPN, people are now using a lot more soft phones and collaboration applications on their desktops, and therefore there's a change in that application usage over that VPN, over that private VPN into the data center, and then from an application point of view, from a data point of view, a huge ramp up in software as a service technologies. So Microsoft Office 365, for example, Ring Central, and so on, which would allow users to collaborate their data, but using applications in the cloud for storage of that data and for producing content, etc. But there's still an operational need to keep the existing network running. So there is a branch office, there's a data center, there's applications running on servers, either in private or in the cloud, etc. So those operations still need to be continued. But also when you're considering mixing domestic internet and applications at home along with business internet applications, then there's been a huge, I guess, impact in the home environment, and the change in use of the internet, because the internet has been a transport mechanism for many organizations. Not just a private MPLS backbone, but using the internet for carrying business traffic. But with everybody now working at home and being bored and having time to spend on their hands, then the use of applications like Netflix, gaming applications, YouTube, and a whole host of other video content being produced to help school children learn, to help people continue doing training, and to communicate. The internet has suddenly become quite saturated. Now, what's quite interesting is that the internet itself, the provisioning and dimensioning that the likes of BT and the likes of Deutsche Telekom and so on around the globe have built their backbones on, those provisioning and scaling mechanisms have allowed the internet to absorb all of this traffic, but there's been a huge impact on the actual broadband speeds themselves, because of the amount of traffic that's coming in from the home into the DSLAMs. Broadband speeds have decreased, which have ultimately affected people's ability to get a high quality video stream in, or even outbound, get a good voice over IP connection. So those applications that are ramping up at home have impacted people's ability to work at home, and also affected businesses' ability to operate over the internet. So a huge change in application usage there. Now, if we look as to what that means to an organisation, then, as embracing this work from home paradigm, it basically means there's a number of phases they go through. There's an immediate reaction of making sure that employees have the basic connectivity they need. They've got the right applications, they've got the right laptops, and they can get up and working immediately. But then that means, as employees are now working at home, there will be an impact to the corporate network. So what does that mean in terms of a shift in data traffic patterns? What does it mean in terms of a branch? Is a branch closed down fully? Is it still operational? Are there applications running at that branch which still need to be providing connectivity to people who are working at home? So that then leads to the customer going through this third phase, which is, what is the shift in their IT initiatives? So now they've reacted and got people connected. How do they now focus and prioritize the right investments to the right place in the network, to the right people, to ensure business continuity throughout this particular pandemic instance? But I think it'll get customers really looking at business continuity in the bigger scheme of things. What if we get another one of these in 3, 4, or 5 years' time? And if, like me, you've been watching and become an armchair virologist and watching some of the great content produced out there by some of the great medical officers, you'll realize that this is not going to be just a one-off. We'll see it again in another 10, 15 years' time, or maybe even sooner. So businesses, I think, are going to be focusing more now on how do they prioritize. And I think that's going to be a really good opportunity for you as partners to help consult with them on those priorities.
And I think that's a great point there too, Peter, right? It's like, these are decisions that many of you are having to make right now, and that's just coming as this pandemic occurred. So, it's just not making these decisions, but how do we make the best decision? What information are we going to use to understand what is the best way to reprioritize? How do we make a decision without really good information about what's behaving? We just can't run and attack something if we don't have an underlying idea of what we're going to change or where the problems are at. So these are important things to consider, but remember, you have to have something to back up these decisions as you go along this path. Sorry, Peter, just wanted to kind of reinforce some of the thoughts there.
No, Alex, I think that underlines fundamentally an important point. We'll come back round to that later, and that is, making decisions based on good data. And if you don't have good data, how can you make a good decision? And I think we'll take many governments making a decision based on scientific data, and yet some places are making decisions based on subjective and emotional things. So from our point of view, being able to provide great data points for organisations to look at how they prioritise IT initiatives is important. So what have we seen? We've seen there are many collaboration, contact center, voice over IP applications, and they've all seen a massive surge. Some of the big names listed here on the right, have seen a surge in usage, and that's presented their own challenges in scaling up capacity. but even so, the impact on the users in terms of their experience they have with these applications is very visible. So people are using these video conferencing applications to mitigate the fact that they can't travel for business travel anymore. Trade shows and other events have been cancelled and shifted to online events. Children and other organisations can't do any classroom-based learning, so therefore shifting to distance-based learning, and even telehealth and using telepresence over these applications to do remote healthcare as well. So people are being very innovative and creative in how they use collaboration apps, and I think I'm always I always like to try and give people an idea to inspire them on how they can use it. And I think these are great tools, but for your customers, how could your customer use these in a more effective way to still reach their customer base and therefore maintain their own business?
Yeah, I have an interesting kind of a feedback here too. As you think about how people are using some of these video teleconferencing tools, funny, my girlfriend uses WebEx, and she just uses the audio piece, but the team has decided they need to turn on video, and it's kind of funny. You'd think maybe we don't need to turn on video, we don't want to possibly hurt our VPN or oversubscribe it, but that's not the way they think either. They just want to talk and interact like they normally would in the office. So as people are enabling these, they're going to expect that great experience from these products, and it's just something to kind of be aware of. People may turn on the video, they may start doing the media sharing part of these applications too, that really start to hurt your VPN when it comes in. So being aware of how these applications are being used, how is my team going to use this? Are they forcing everyone to turn on video? Are they sharing large files in this as well that are maybe not necessary? Maybe there's a file share, or maybe online way to store it in the cloud, for example, rather than sharing it to these applications. So it's good to know that they're using it, and then how is this being used, and how will this impact my network and my VPN? So great way to get around this COVID-19, but how is this going to be used, impact my network? And as Peter's talking too, to consider how are we going to be prepared for this in the future, as this starts to become more popular. But,
yeah, good points there. Good points there, Alex, on collaboration. I think what we saw in the beginning, the immediate knee-jerk reaction with people was get a laptop, get a VPN connection in, and get some collaborative technologies running. I think now most countries, most businesses have settled into business as usual. The next thing is looking at, okay, what is the impact and how can they manage that effectively? If we very briefly look at sort of the increase in VPN usage, and this is only until March, but I can imagine that in many other countries, onto the right-hand side of this graph, those percentages and number of cases will have significantly increased now. It would have been interesting if we could get stats from other areas, but generally, that increase in VPN usage means what may have been provisioned for an ad hoc work from home basis, or providing connectivity for the evening or over the weekend, now they're being used 24/7. So that puts increasing strain on concentrators, on the proxies, on firewalls, on the backhaul into the internet, etc. So but how do organizations know, and how do they know and measure what that impact's going to be, and to therefore help them work out, is this something that we need to provision and bolster in the short to medium term, or is this something that we can live through, or is this something that actually in the long term we're just going to have to invest in this and increase the sizing? So if we take a model here of sort of the network traffic patterns, and clearly on the left is the day-to-day corporate, with remote sites connected to the data center with some apps there. And then we've got our public cloud apps in AWS, Azure, and Google, etc. And then down on the bottom, we've got software as a service apps like Office 365, RingCentral, etc. And then what we have in orange is this shift from of employees moving out of the organization to connecting externally, but also more customers connecting externally, and even people might have partners connecting into the organization as well. So the shift in traffic patterns becomes rather interesting from that point of view, in that depending on the segment and your organization, are you going to be just continuing business as usual? So take a supermarket, for example, a large supermarket chain. They are still open. They're still ordering. Their ordering systems are still working. There's still point of sale data working, etc. So all of their corporate data and connections between their sites, the supermarkets, and the data centers pretty much is business as usual. Whereas if you take other organizations that are where they're in, some of the employees are now working from home, but some still have to stay on site to maintain a sort of a basic level of lights on, then you're going to get another different set of traffic patterns. And then you get some organizations where clearly everything is totally work from home now. So there's stories of architect firms in London where they've left their offices, haven't been back since, and they're all working perfectly effectively from home. So I think depending on the customer type and the type of business, there will be a sliding scale from an engineering point of view of how the traffic patterns are affected across them. So this will have different impacts then, depending on different parts of the network. So at the WAN edge, where the VPN and firewalls connect, maybe within their software-defined WAN, increasing traffic off to their cloud-based applications. Call centers shifting traffic patterns from a dedicated call center to call center agents working at home and using more voice over IP and collaborative technologies there. And then an increase in the different applications. Are organizations shifting to using cloud-hosted based apps, or are they going to still keep the apps hosted in the data center, etc.? So these new traffic patterns. So if we take a sort of a basic customer example, if we look at the before, we'd have a campus type environment and branches which using SD-WAN would connect via the internet or private MPLS networks through to our servers, which could be in a data center, infrastructure as a service or software as a service based applications. And then along comes a pandemic or a situation whereby we have to move everybody out to working from home. So now suddenly everybody's working at home, and pretty much most of the traffic is now coming into the data center. So it's going to be, can I augment this with a drawy thing? Here we go. It's going to be around, well, that's a shame I can't draw on it, never mind. It's going to be around this VPN concentrator here in the data center where we're going to see a lot more of that traffic patterns, and therefore how do we measure the difference between the flows that have gone from the branch, from the campus to these cloud apps across SD-WAN? Think of all that traffic day to day to now shifting at home and through the VPN concentrator to the data center or out to the internet. So where and how are we measuring that? How are customers measuring that? And how are they reporting to ensure that they have enough capacity on these devices here?
I think this is a great slide, and that's also a very great point there, Peter. I mean, a lot of folks that I work with that are going through the same thing many of the folks on the line may be going through, everything seems to be running slow as the users come in. So we tend to focus in on the VPN or the firewall, right? It makes sense to us mentally. This is where we may have a certain amount of utilization or a choke point. And, some customers I've worked with, everything looks really great there. So that's a point of consideration. And the reason I really like this slide is because your data may go through many different places to get to where that server that's hosting the data at, where the video is being shared, the controller, etc. So it's not just truly about the VPN where it comes in. It's also these different things going on in the network and having an understanding. I was working with a customer in a very similar situation where their traffic came in through the data center, it was going through a branch, it was doing a loop coming back in through the data center, and then finally coming out to the user. So it wasn't really taking an optimal path. But if you just consider one single point in your network, maybe the one that makes sense, that's just not the entire path of the conversation. You really have to consider, how is the person accessing this application? Where in the network could these pain points be? And then having visibility in there allows you to improve it, or consider other things. Maybe we don't need to have everybody coming in through the data center to reach the applications. We can have them go off on the internet or host them in the cloud. So really it comes to understanding the flow, how traffic behaves around in your network, and then identifying where those pain points may be. It may be the VPN or firewall or through some other point in the network. But just again, really considering not just the VPN, but your entire enterprise potentially.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I think that leads on to questions to think about for your customers then in this period of time is what actually are those traffic pattern impacts on their network? Is that what's happening with their WAN circuits outbound to the internet or into other backhaul? Is there sufficient capacity? How can you help them provision? How do you measure that and then help them provision new bandwidth? Clearly, branch LAN Wi-Fi traffic is gone down, but what have you got essential workers there? Is there a critical parts of the business where you still need to keep that and still keep that monitoring going on? With people now working at home, will you get better visibility of any security breaches that might be happening down in the branches? Clearly, IT-based security mechanisms scanning the networks, trying to compromise servers and stuff like that. So the fact that you're taking off all of this user traffic, and you're just leaving mostly data server or client-based applications running on a network, can give you visibility into things you might not have seen before. Another things to think about is, what is the if you've still got essential workers working in the branch and people working at home, how is that collaboration? How is that collaboration happening, and what is the user experience for that? And where are there points for improvement in the network if they are suffering that? And that leads on then to what actually hasn't changed, because everything we've talked about, although it's a shift in traffic patterns, as an IT operational team, as a network operational team, you're still having to do pretty much the same sort of thing. You're still having to monitor the performance of your WAN edge. You're still having to monitor the performance of your SD-WAN, the data center, down into the LAN, and probably even more so because hackers don't rest as much as the virus doesn't rest. Quite ironically, hackers don't rest as well, and therefore can be exploiting this time to exploit organizations who may not have a strong security posture. So getting telemetry and visibility from an application and security point of view is still very important. If we look at the model here, and and I think that's really important to encourage your customers that whilst they might be focusing on ensuring the workforces are up and running with applications, making sure that workforce have the connectivity, they still need to pay attention to what's happening day to day in respect of the network infrastructure they have at the moment, but also more importantly, what are those data flows to their corporate applications and public cloud applications. So what I think is a really useful way to view this is that we still need to maintain visibility of users and applications. How are those users connecting to the network? What is their application usage? How are applications themselves performing? Are users getting a great experience? And there's ways and means you can monitor and extract data from firewalls and from WAN edge devices and VPN concentrators to populate tools to give you that flow-based view on a per user basis or an aggregate view on an application basis. Still important to monitor the WAN and the WAN in the sense of, you know, connectivity to branches, but also into cloud applications to data center to make sure that the COS is still working there for those applications that users at home are using. And then generally, as we move to SD, customers have moved to SD-WAN and maybe extending SD-WAN capability out into the home. You know, there are solutions which allow SD-WAN to be inserted into the home, you know, therefore monitoring flow and application usage there. So it's all about maintaining that performance monitoring across the business as these traffic patterns change.
And again, when we talk about issues that you may see on the VPN or users complain about, again, it's just not about the available bandwidth. When it comes to performance monitoring, that gives us one of the key aspects is latency. You know, where are we experiencing latency? Is there latency before the users are able to come into the VPN, or is there latency within our own network? You know, it's always that black hole that I hate to troubleshoot myself. If the problem's out on the internet, I can't control that as well as I may be able to control within my own environment, but I want to identify that clearly. So not only is it I have enough available pipe, but how are my users, what is their latency to those applications, and are there methods that I can do by analyzing and reviewing the data to make decisions to improve upon that. So again, not just bandwidth, let's also consider latency or jitter packet loss, for example.
And those things all tie into an overall strategy an organization has to take in an IT strategy as they adapt to these phases. As we mentioned before, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and looking at IT priorities. And initially the reaction may be to allow people just to connect to cloud applications or to put in a dedicated VPN pipe. But as knowledge and as the data set of information around traffic flows become more understandable by IT, they can then start to look at implementing some better VPN strategies to be more efficient with the home bandwidth and the WAN bandwidth. So, for example, going split tunnel versus full tunnel into an organization, and that has different security implications. You know, we're not going to advise on security policies here, but you know, there are clearly implications there from a security point of view. But for traffic management, easing off the amount of traffic that's going through the corporate firewalls and splitting it to the internet is one thing. You know, many organizations saw a huge surge in Netflix traffic going through their firewalls upon the first few weeks of people working at home, and clearly that's something you don't want to be sucking up those resources on your VPN concentrators there. So you know, talking to them about VPN strategies are going to be really interesting. So what can you do then? What are some of the things that you can be looking at yourselves at the moment and looking at in terms of conversations to be having with customers to help them through this? You know, as Mike said, many customers are looking for extra support from you as partners over this time, but I think it's a great opportunity for you to strengthen those relationships with customers and to build out your own suite of services. And I think this ties into the whole network life cycle, or operational life cycle, in terms of, you know, helping customers understand the state of their network, their application usage, how users are behaving, how individual network devices are behaving. So that's sort of a planning and auditing phase. So putting software in place that will receive the telemetry from the network and various other devices to then produce reports to help them understand how COS is working, where capacity it may be being exceeded, where they've got spare capacity, and so on. So always understanding the state of your network. You know, and if you think back to, you know, a science-based approach to COVID and using data to make good decisions, it's important customers have this good data set, which comes from auditing the network. Then once a shift in traffic patterns happen and they need to make an IT decision to deploy more laptops, deploy certain applications, deploy more collaboration, deploy more VPN concentrator capacity, and so on and so on and so on, all of that needs verification as to the impact of it. So we understand where we are today, day zero. We've deployed new technologies. from yourselves from a consultative point of view, and therefore you can start to verify the impact of that deployment of an application or of a new piece of hardware, and see the effect across the network fabric of that technology on the latency for applications, the number of flows and capacity, and so on. And then once that's deployed, continuing the monitoring and day-to-day operations and helping the customer troubleshoot and understand what's happening in the network and across the network fabric. So by doing application performance troubleshooting using flow-based mechanisms or packet-based mechanisms. So these three things here are real opportunities for you to engage and talk to customers on a suite of services you could offer using clearly a rich set of tools. Alex, I'd like to hand over to you, and so you can talk a bit more on the auditing side from your experience, and certainly what LiveAction can help bring to the table in that sense.
Yeah, most definitely, Peter. And again, I think having an idea of what's happening within the network, and I think this gives your partners very good opportunities to engage with the customers. Where do we start at when there is a problem, or what are we looking at? Where can we identify an issue to potentially fix problems that they're seeing? So by coming in and auditing and seeing, what's normal or what type of problems are out there, are going to give you those places to attack at first. Some of the audits that we could do is your quality of service that they have across the network. How are my policies performing? Where are I having issues in my policies? Am I having drops in my critical data coming in? Or quality of service is a mechanism to also protect traffic. So you can come in and start to see how that quality of service is doing, where I'm having problems, and places to start come in and fix it. Or, just in general, auditing the applications that are out there. Is this application using too much bandwidth, or is it due to something like a latency problem? Or funny enough, I was working with a large bank, and they were going to they wanted to increase the bandwidth on their VPN to support additional users. But as we started to look at some of their video traffic that was coming in, certain subsets of users were having a good experience and other users were having a poor experience. And they found that the issue really was going to the secondary video conferencing server that they had. So anyone connecting to the first one had a good time. But again, when we looked at the traffic, we saw it was connecting to the second server, but why was this having problems? So understanding how your data transacts through the network, where are those problems going to be at? So by putting LiveAction in there, we're going to call out those problems for the users. We're going to show where latency is being too high. We have alerts to help users be proactive in many of these places. So how would we do this to make it easier for the consumers or end users of LiveAction? So by mapping out the network. Again, is it the VPN? Is it the firewall? Is it the core switch? Is it some other point in the network? So having that visibility into how the network's connected to each other. And then by taking the metadata we have and overlaying it allows you to understand the path that these conversations are taking out through the network. But the VPN is important. What can I do at this place? I can look at things like the top talkers. Who's really consuming the most traffic here? Is this really business critical traffic or not? Or is it some unnecessary file transfer that's just slamming our VPN, for example? Other things we can do is we can start to look at the firewall as well. As the traffic starts to come into the firewall, is it taking the path that we'd expect through the network? Or is it being denied through the firewall? Or is it taking another exit point from the firewall than we may expect itself? So again, being able to come and audit these different points of the network are going to start to give you points of attack where issues may be occurring. Other things I like to is to kind of baseline audit your applications as well. So, what's normal for an application or not? Is this actually a problem with the application? We could pull back latency metrics and say, is this out and beyond the thresholds for the application itself, or could it be due to something else causing these problems? So having these metrics to know when an application is normal or not is going to go really far in being able to protect the data. And something else I like to bring up here too that's not well used is being able to use quality of service. There are things I can do to push back unnecessary data sets. So by having visibility into what's going across the devices, I can start to use quality of service to better control and protect that traffic. So can get really specific about applications I want to squeeze down. A very common thing I would do is put a lot of my applications in a scavenger class of service. So unnecessary applications can only get so much bandwidth themselves. So I always like to consider this coming back to some of that day zero. Before I even attack something, I have to have an idea of what's going across the network, where those problems may be at, and then where I can give really good recommendations to my customers. So it's very simple to do from within the system itself. But I think after we get the audit, then what's going to kind of be our next phase, and that will be the next one, is troubleshooting, right? That's what we really want to do, is we want to be able to figure out where the problems are at. So again, one of the things that I really like to promote is not just using a single point to really look at the information. So what I mean is, what LiveAction can do is we can bring in any Connect data directly from the user's laptop. So we can track and see if they're using split VPN. Is the traffic going out to the internet, or is it coming in through the VPN itself? That's one sensor point. We understand what's happening from the user's perspective up until it comes into the firewall. And then from the firewall, we can start tracking what's occurring through there. Then we can look at the next point in the network. Maybe that's going to be a router or switch or a load balancer. Who knows, some other point in the network. Those can also be brought into LiveAction. We can track the utilization, the path that that's taking through the network. So one of the things that's nice here too is that many of these devices that we're using, we don't have to come and put something in place to collect this data. So when it comes time to audit or troubleshoot, if the users are even remote, LiveAction can be deployed as an OVA. We take in the NetFlow metadata, so we can deploy this without anybody being on-prem, and then the information we're collecting is from their own devices. So the routers, switches, firewalls become a sensor and allow us to help troubleshoot. And like on this slide that we have here, probably one of our best capabilities is to do a flow path analysis, where in the data center in New York, you can see a conversation flowing across multiple devices. The circles will represent switches, routers, firewalls. So from these multiple sensors, I pulled that this voice conversation was not having a problem. But as the conversation traverses through the service provider cloud, we can start to see whether the impact occurs. You know, maybe on a VPN user, we wouldn't have an MPLS cloud. Maybe they're just coming in to the network. So we'd have a circle representing the AnyConnect user hitting the firewall. So the idea here is to visually represent the conversation and show the performance impact through each data point. So I'll know in the network where we're having a voice call problem, for example. Or there's other neat things we can do. We can use Cisco like SLA type tests. We can configure tests on routers to do synthetic tests to users' endpoints or other elements through the network, maybe to that server itself. So from my WAN router, what does the performance look like to my own application in my data center? Is there some type of latency that's being impacted there? So again, using some of these mechanisms built even into the devices themselves to do troubleshooting without ever having to touch a device within the network. And I also like how we simplify a lot of the data through here too. You know, instead of looking at subnets to identify a site or user, we have semantics to make the data more simple. So users coming in through a VPN, we can say VPN users, and you can run reports based on them instead of subnets and IPs. Or we actually pull usernames in when we collect this information. So you don't even have to do this by IPs and such. So by using semantics that we have in the system, it'll make it easier to troubleshoot some of these problems that we see. But the reason I really like the slides here is because you'll get visual ways to look at the network, not just reports. And we have lots of great reports, but again, seeing a VPN user was impacted before it came in the network, or it was being impacted after the core switch, really is powerful in identifying where a problem is. Okay, I think don't want to go too much more deep on these slides looking at the time range, but again, very powerful in troubleshooting. And I really just want to emphasize using those other sensor points in the network to be able to identify and troubleshoot and give you a bigger holistic view. Or again, like that path analysis could show things like asymmetric paths. So maybe it's going and taking one path and then taking a different return path from the application server. So again, many different things that can impact the users. And by having a more holistic view of the network, you're going to be able to troubleshoot very simply.
Brilliant. Alex, I think those are really good points. And I think it leads on to sort of the next steps for yourselves as partners on, how are you, ask yourselves, how are you supporting your customer needs? And clearly, many customers are now looking to you for that help. And I believe the partnership with yourselves on providing that ability to audit networks, to look at the capacity of your VPN, how apps are being used, what's the quality being used, etc. So, what auditing capabilities can you provide to your customers? And then, your reactionary services. Can you provide a means to drop in some software to analyze the flows, or even where there is no net flow data, can you drop in a packet capture device that can convert that packet data into flow-based analysis and so on. So there's a number of services you could look at using a suite of network monitoring, performance and management tools. And I think developing a complete suite of solutions is what many of you are looking for and looking to do moving forward. And I think around this area on business continuity and managing network performance is a really good opportunity. And I think to understand more about that, then Tony's developed his SE workshop, which I'd really strongly recommend you contact Nivola on and sign up to understand more then on how LiveAction can help you build those capabilities. We've pretty much come to the end of the conversation and discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and the impact on the traffic patterns, and then opportunities for yourselves to help customers maintain a baseline, to look at their IT priorities and where they should invest and how you can help them. We have some more resources listed in the slides. If you click on them, there's a whole load of great bedtime reading and videos to watch, which delve into a lot of these in more detail. But I think we'll hand back to Mark and Tony to add a few wrap-up words. And I'd like to say, Alex, thanks very much for your insights. Really valuable, and I'm sure there's a great depth and plenty more we could share in future. And leave it to Mark and Tony to wrap up, maybe with some questions from the audience.
Yeah. Silence. Mark, you there?
Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
I had problems unmuting. Hi, it's Tony here. Are you there, Mark?
I'm indeed. Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, I'll leave it with you too.
Okay, I just wanted to emphasise. So I've got a workshop coming up in a few weeks' time. I believe it's May the 8th. Is it 28th?
It is.
Yeah,
May the 28th.
in the afternoon. So we've got the link there, and it'll be a follow-on workshop from the previous SE workshop I did a couple of weeks back. And so I'm going to be talking about, the LiveAction solution in detail, and give you a demonstration on how you can perform some of this baselining and auditing of your network, and talk about how you could take this to your customers as a service, or even, of course, sell the LiveAction solution to them as well. So that's coming up in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, so that's the 28th of May, 2:00, British Standard, British Summer Time, sorry. And we will also, if you click on that link that's shown, we will send these slides out to you all, and you can register for that training that we're doing. I'm not sure that there are any. I'm not seeing any questions on the chat, so I'm assuming all the information we're giving you is either too much or you know, we've answered every single question that you could ever consider. But what we would like, please do not hesitate in contacting us. The LiveAction solution and the LiveAction products are absolutely fundamental in enabling you to deliver services and solutions around the network, which everyone is talking about the cloud, everyone is talking about applications living wherever, but the common denominator, or the thing that makes all this happen, is the network. And you know, with LiveAction technology and solutions, you're able to do all the wonderful things that have been talked about this afternoon, and provide your customers and you services that can enhance what they do. So with that, I don't know if we can hit the next. I think the next slide. I think that's just.
I think that's it now, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, just the resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. I think. Until the next time, appreciate your time. I mean, it's been a long one, this one with an hour, and we seem to have kept most people on for the whole duration. Appreciate your time. Thank you, and please stay safe. Okay.
Thanks all indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.